Hello everybody, it's the Warhipster here, coming at you with another review video. Yes, well, this one's more of a preview video, and it's kind of a box and build video. It's many different types of video, because of course I'm talking about the big news, the big box. It's upside down, it's Leviathan. That could have been smoother. Yes, this is not a boombox, this is Leviathan, the Leviathan box. I guess you could say it's a boom box. It makes a very satisfying boom when you throw it down, because it is thick. Look at it. It's a big boy. It's a very big box. And it absolutely should be a big box, because this is the launch of 10th edition. It's here, finally, after 3 long years. Well, if you like 9th edition, with the new core book in here, almost reaching 400 pages and 72 brand new Citadel miniatures. There's a whole lot of stuff in here. And a whole lot of stuff inside a box means that there is going to be a whole lot of content coming your way from myself. Yes, we've got about 20 plus videos on the way, which is why this one is just focusing on the box itself and the building of said box. We're not going to be looking at the 10th core rules. We're not going to be looking at painting it, because that's all happening as we speak. Well, no, I'm speaking to you. My hands aren't doing the painting, and I don't have a second set of hands to do the painting. The painting is happening, but this video is about the box and the build. So if you'd like to stay up to date with all of the content that's coming your way from Warhipster Towers, then do hit the subscribe button, because it would help me out a great deal. And if you like this video, please do leave a like and comment below. Are you excited for Leviathan? Because, well, you should be. So if you're excited to have a look in the box, we've got a little supercut of what it's like to open the box before we actually dive in and look at the stuff. Hold on, let me just sort the thumbnail. But seriously, that is the real reaction to the stuff that's in here. Screams. Or at least posing like the famous painting. So, are you ready for a little bit more of a detailed look inside Leviathan? I know you are, that's why you're still here. So let's have a little detailed look inside the box at all the wonderful goodies that are on the way with 10th edition and the Leviathan box.
Yes, here it is, the most enormous box of all times. It's like Indomitus and Dominion all over again. I'm very excited by this. It's very cool. Yes, Leviathan, here we are. We've already opened it once, but I packed it all away again so that we could open it once more. So we just unveil the lid. We take off the lovely artwork. Man, it's such a cool image. And here we have a pile of plastic sprues. Yes, there's tons. You get 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 7 and 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 and 13. Now, as you can see, nestling just down here, I actually have 2 parts loose. This is what happened when the box arrived. It was already loose in there, so maybe just the pressure of the amount of product in this box just popped these 2 out. And as you can see, we've got 1 bit here. I believe that's from a Von Ryan's Leaper. And we've got this, which is the kind of underslung bolt gun bit for the Librarian. So they've just left them in there, just to keep them safe, but do watch out in case any of your pieces ping off. It can happen. And give me 1 second whilst I put this massive pile of sprues in my hand down. So we'll just take these two little bits, we'll just put them to one side just for the moment, and we unveil another insert. There's your massive instruction booklet, and there is the enormous tome of potential for Warhammer 10th edition Leviathan. Look at that. Amazing stuff. Right, we also get our transfer sheet with the Blood Angels, Space Wolves, Raven Guard, Imperial Fists, Ultramarines, they're all present. Salamanders, White Scars, don't seem to have made an appearance here. Maybe that's a portent of things to come. Inside we also get the deck of matched play cards. There they are, teaching you how to play Leviathan games in 10th edition. We get these two very large bases. I wonder what they could be for. And we also get a bag of bases here. We've got these two others that have just popped out of my bag because my bag was split at the top there, as you can see. Scooch them back in. We have another enormous wide base, and that is going to be for another one of our large Tyranid monsters. And there we go. That's everything you get in the box. It's pretty cool. It's pretty cool stuff. Okay, so now that the excitement of opening everything is over, let's start with the building, shall we? Now we've got our Leviathan instruction manual, which obviously is a very hefty booklet, because this has got everything in it, the Space Marines and the Tyranids. You can see the Tyranids here on the back here, and this is everything you get in the box, which is an absolutely ridiculous amount of models. But when we look in here, what you also get is these very basic unit cards. These are familiar to those of us who've bought Warhammer 40,000 recently in the current boxes and things. You get the similar type of thing, but you do get a unit card here which has got a little bit more information than what we've had in the past in those previous battle kind of instruction manuals. So you do, for example, get the actual weapons in terms of what their rules are. So you got, like, for example here, anti-psycho 2+, devastating wounds, and that's kind of indicating to you which ones these are based on the keys. You got 2 and 1, 2 and 1. So this is kind of a little bit more information, but you still don't know the names of things. So in this particular set, it's not too much of an issue because this is all push fit stuff, right? So there's not really that much in the way of optional content in here because you've got your kind of very specific kind of models to build. But there is more information here, which is really nice to see. We don't have any of the unit rules or special rules and things like that. But as you can see, Tyranid Prime, Neuro Tyrant, Screamer Killer, Von Ryans, Leapers, Termagants, Neurogaunts, Barbgaunts, and Psychophage are all present here in the back. But rather than reading this thing from back to front, which I do quite often mysteriously, we're going to start at the front properly. So as you can see here, you get your nice key of everything that you get in the box with which to build all of your models, and we have our wonderful base diagram here, which is great. I really do love this. This is a feature that should be talked about more often. We've got our, this is where it kind of, if you're not sure on the size of the base, you're going to pop it on there, and if it covers it up and there's no other kind of lines and things, then you know that you've got the right one. I'm going to demonstrate that now with this 120mm oval base just here. So we pop this one over the top, you know that that is the right base to go there, like that sort of thing. And then we need to figure out where that actually gets used. Probably not on a Librarian or a Captain in Terminator armor. I believe this is for the Screamer Killer. We're just going to go forward in time. Here we go. Screamer Killer. 90mm. Ooh. So maybe this is for the other big boy whose name escapes me. There it is, the last one. 120mm oval base. So that's where this one will go. Excellent. Excellent stuff. So, back to the beginning then. The other thing to point out here is that it kind of very much tells you where things are supposed to be allocated. So the Space Marine transfer sheet obviously goes with the Space Marines, and you've got your keys of A, B, C, D, E, ×2, and F, G, H, I, J, K. So these are the labeling of the sprues. So when you look at each of the guys, so it says A, 14, all of these bits, B, and so on and so forth, you know that that's A and that's B. So these are the sprues that you need to hunt for in order to build that specific part of the kit. That's how you kind of interpret these things. Now everything in here is push fit, but we are still going to look at it unit by unit, as we have done in most of these review videos by now, to kind of keep the format the same. But yeah, I'm expecting some really, really cool things. So we are of course going to start with the Captain in Terminator armor, and this is the 2 sprues, this one here, which are A. So I'm going to go and hunt for those sprues right now. So here we are then. Here is sprue A, and I didn't realize this by looking at the picture. I was too excited to get on with things. You've actually got the Space Marine Captain here, and we've got the Tyranid Prime. So the Tyranid Prime will belong here. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to keep this sprue intact for now, because, well, it'll just make things a little bit easier to follow. But I'm just going to look very carefully here. I don't think we have any more Space Marine and Tyranid sprues connected, as far as I can see. No, I don't think so. So here, B is the Librarian, C is the Stern Guard, D is the Terminators, E is the Infernus squad, and F is the Dreadnought. We have our Tyranids, Tyranids. Lovely stuff. So yes, this is a 2-parter, which is fun. So we are going to be building in order of the instructions, as you can see here. So we're going to start with the Captain in Terminator armor, as we've already previously mentioned, and we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 components. So that's fairly respectable for a character. This looks pretty cool. So let's have a look at the sprue, shall we? This is just what we're going to do. This is what we do best here. And, well, we're just going to have a very, very brief look and see if we can spot any mold lines or any potential areas where you might want to watch out. So firstly, the thing I'm going to point out is that we've got our cloak here, and it is in one single piece. And that is a massive piece of fabric there, but it is in one piece, which is really, really exciting. You're not going to have to press like half a cloak together using the magic that Games Workshop has when they build these push fit kits, because can you believe it, these are in fact push fit. And we're missing our component here, so this leg is not from Von Ryan's Leapers. This is from the Tyranid, this is from the Prime. And let's just make sure. So there's our 2 little connection points where it's pressed out. I'm just gonna like that and like that. So yes, that's where that should be. There we go. Mystery solved. Anyway, back to the Terminator Captain. We've got our connection points, one on the side of the cloak here, but we do have one that's actually on the inside, on the flat of the fabric. And whilst you won't necessarily see that very often because it's right at the hem of his cloak, and when we look at the picture of him just there, you can't really see it from the kind of forward out or from the back, but you still will want to be careful when you're clipping this out and smoothing that down so you don't gouge it right out. The other 2 connection points are here on the sides, which will be covered up by his arms, which is fantastic. And we have a pretty decently laid out sprue otherwise. We do have, mysteriously, still doing it, not sure why, but on our legs, we've got those kind of hip plates where we do have our connection points with the sprues on the flat of the armor, and I don't like it. It always bothers me. That's one thing to watch out for. You make sure you don't gouge that one out, because you will get a weird looking armor plate otherwise. The legs, we've got a connection point here on the kind of side of the calf muscle, but the leg is going to cover that over nicely. So whilst you do still need to be careful, you don't have to be 100% accurate with your gouging, with your smoothing off the mold lines, and you can just kind of be a little bit cavalier, but you will want to be careful around here, particularly on that little connection point just there, because that one will be very, very, very visible because it's right by his head, and it slots in just here. And if you see this kind of gouge going on there, it will be very, very, very obvious. So do make sure you watch out for that one. Another thing to be very careful of here is that his head has a connection point on the chin, which is great, but it also has a connection point on the hair, which I don't like, and it needs to stop, because we've seen that it doesn't need to happen like this, but it is what it is. So be careful when you're smoothing this one down. Again, you don't want to leave any sprue behind, and you definitely don't want to gouge it out, because it'll have a weird kind of crater on the top of his head, and you will be able to see it just over there. It's not immediately obvious, but will be obvious to your eye once you've looked at it for a little bit. Shoulder pads, again, we've got connection points on the front of the little kind of tilting plate just here. Same on both of these, and we've got connection points on the top of the kind of trim of the armor. So again, be very careful with these, because you don't want to gouge them. Make sure you have a mold line remover or the flat of your knife to hand, and you just take it very steady. And on this Terminator Captain, another sin of finding them as I go, we've got a connection point here on the blade, and that is something that we kind of have to be very, very careful with, because again, if you gouge it too much with a knife, it's where mold line remover comes in handy, because you can't really gouge with a mold line remover. But if you gouge that there, you will have a chunk missing from the sword, and it becomes very obvious. It's kind of very skinny blade in one little section, so just be very careful when you're around there. Otherwise, this is a pretty cool sprue. Components are massive, highly detailed. I'm very excited to put him together. He was absolutely a highlight of mine from the box, and he looks absolutely fantastic. So let's get on with that, shall we? We shouldn't need any glue, but on occasion you might. Now I'm going to start this one not on the time lapse, because we want to see what these pins are like, because if the pins are too big, there is some things that we can do to make things easier. So I'm going to start at the beginning by clipping out this cloak like so. I'm going to go as close as I can to the model, and then just gently pressing it with my clippers like that. So we get our first component out like so, and then we're going to clip out our second as well. We're not going to do any more than that for the moment. So this is the next component is going to be A13. With these push fit kits, you really do want to do this in order like this. So this one I can't really get particularly close, so I'm just going to do it there, and then we can take off that excess, and then we're just going to put a little clip in there like that. So we've got our two bits. Now one thing with these is dry fitting sometimes becomes a little bit complicated, because you do have those pins there, but sometimes you can just do it like that, nice and easy. That's where it's going to go. We're not going to leave it there, because we need to now clean it up. So that's what we're going to do, and I'm going to use my knife. I'm not sure what I've done with it. There it is, hiding under the sprue. I'm going to start with this little bit here, because I know that I left some bits behind. Now when you look at these bits of plastic, when you've got them on the sprue, what you want to do is you just want to, when you're clipping them out, remember kind of how they were on the sprue. So for example, this was on the sprue like this, which means that the mold lines and the kind of clip points are all going to be around in this kind of area. So I know that there's one here, for example, there's one there, you can see that little mark, there's one there, and then there was another one on the inside like that. And as you can see, now that we've got the bit out, we actually do have a mold line around here. So the same thing goes for this. If you look at it, look at this piece in this kind of orientation, you won't see any of those clips marks. But if you do it that way, as it was on the sprue, you can see them there. So we've got mold line here, we've got clip point, clip point, clip point, and clip point. So that's what we need to smooth down and sort out. So we're just going to start with this one just here. I'm just going to take my knife, the sharp end of the blade, and I go quite close with mine, but youngsters will require assistance from a grown-up for this. Like that. Got this next one. Just going to very gently move my blade like that, and then I'm going to move the back of the blade about halfway so I don't get that kind of juddering motion across it, because I want this to be nice and smooth. Give it a quick blow. There we go, that's nice and smoothed down. Then I'm just going to rotate the piece like this in hunt of more mould lines. There's one just there. We can just get by very gently moving the back of our blade over. And we've got quite a thick bit of flash just here. It's where I couldn't get quite close enough. So you want to be quite careful here because I don't want to gouge that skull up there. You could do this in the opposite direction. It does just require a little bit of precision here, so as not to gouge it. Like so. I'm going to do this bit here as well. Like that. And we're just going to very gently take those mould lines off. Like so. One thing I would recommend is if you do have a spare sort of medium shade brush like this, you can just run this over components like this just to make sure you've dusted off all of your shavings. Like that, or you can wait until you've done the whole model. Just so that when you come to prime it, you don't have any sort of weird dusty bits that appear. So we're going to do the cloak very quickly here. So we're just going to take that bit off there. Because the thing with the push fits is that sometimes they're so flush that you need to make sure that you take the kind of any bits of flash off, because that might be what is getting in the way of your happy and harmonious model. So as you can see, I mentioned this before, we've got that mold line just there. So we're just going to very gently move our knife like so. Like that, until we know that there's not a line there anymore. And then we do actually have a clip point here, so we're just going to use the sharp edge of our blade like that. And again, we're going to smooth it out like that and like that. There we go. And then we don't have any more mold lines, but we do have a couple more clip points. There's one just there. Just going to take off. There we go. And then we're just going to use the sharp edge to take that clip point off as well. Like so. Give it a quick blow. Give it a quick dust. Like that. And then, as we did before, we know that this goes in like that. So now, to really test what these kind of pins are like, we need to take our next piece, which is going to be A12, which is this bit just here. So again, we're going to come in with the clippers, go nice and close. Again, can't quite get it there, so I'm just going to clip that as close as I can. You need to be careful on this one. Give that a clip. You need to be careful on that one there as well. Give that one a clip. And then once again, just going to check it in that same profile. So there's our clip points. So we're just going to get that one off like that. Give it a quick smooth over with the flat part of the blade, like so. Smooth out that leg. Give that a clip. And check in here, and that's always a good place to check, is inside legs for mold lines, because that's often where they appear. There we go. We've got this one here, which we want to be really careful on. So we just want to smooth it out with the sharp part of our blade, and then smooth it once more with the dull part of the blade, flat part of the blade as I keep calling it. There we go. And we've got this one here as well. You want to go with the shape of the model. Because on those curved features, that's how you gouge. So if you come in too hard, you would cut it there. You see, you would lose this detail here, and you would get that really sort of weird, awkward flat, which you desperately don't want. And there we go. So now, moment of truth. This is going to clip in. It's going to push in using that pin just there. So we're just going to line it up, and then we're going to push them together. And that went together nice and easily. And as you can see, it comes right up here, flush, and right up there, flush as well. That's perfect. It's good stuff. That's good assembly. Love it. There we go. So, as far as I can tell, it's pretty good pegs on this one. Of course, there is more to go, and we don't know for certain that they're all going to be great, but that is how I approach building these push fit models. So we're going to do the rest of this on time lapse, and I'll let you know if there were any problems after that. But otherwise, good luck with yours. With that, the captain is done, and this sprue is now empty. One down, many to go. But here he is, and let me just, there we go. It was pretty easy. The only slightly tough bit was this arm. So to put that together was a little bit tricky, just because it kind of wouldn't go in as smoothly as this, as the sword here. So what you want to do when you're doing this is actually press the bolt gun arm into the shoulder and then put the whole thing on, rather than do it the way it suggests in the instructions. Oh, look at that, a hidden librarian and a 40mm base. You can guess where this is going next. So as you can see here, it suggests that you just push this onto here and then pop that on. I suggest popping that whole construction into the arm and then pressing them together like that. And you get an absolutely stunning Terminator captain. The best one I've ever seen, by far. Look at him. Oh. Plastic push fit. But as I'm sure you've probably already figured out by now, and I've already told you that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be doing the Librarian next. So here he is. He requires a 40mm base. Now, one thing I didn't point out is that the captain goes on a 50mm base. That is a huge base size for a model of this size. Well, he's enormous. Look at him. He's big. He's very, very big. In fact, let's compare him to a Emperor's Champion. Look at him. He's huge. That is hench. Anyway, moving on from the Terminator captain, as cool as he is, we're now going to focus on the Librarian. So we're on to sprue B. This is it. So if we head back to page 1, as you can see, there we are. There is sprue B. Here is our missing component, which is this one, which was the one that popped out in the box. So yeah, we've got that, so we can't forget that. Don't want to hunt around for that for too long. But here it is. The Librarian in Terminator armor. Now once again, we don't have any options, so the instructions part is kind of very, very brief here. And what we have is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 components. It's a little bit more involved than the captain, and you can see why. I mean, look at all these gorgeous details and amazing pieces. Look at that leg. Whew. Absolutely outstanding. So this little component is supposed to attach here, like that sort of thing, but it has snapped off, so we kind of have to mark it down a little bit for that. But anyway, that's just my box. It might not be your box as well. I hope it's not. Anyway, Looking at the sprue then, what do we have in terms of things to point out? We have connection points on the axe head, so you want to be careful on that one, because that is going to be very, very visible if you look at the orientation of the model. Right here, that is where it's facing, so he's pretty much presenting to you where a sprue connection point would be, so be very careful when you're dealing with that one. You want to smooth that down nice and smooth, and that doesn't make sense, but we're just going to stand by it. We've got our leg plate here as well, so be careful along that side, because you do have some of that inscription work going on here, so there's a little recess coming along there, so if you gouge that too much, you'll lose the recesses. So you just want to be very careful when you're clipping that one and smoothing that one down. The other area to be careful around here is on this kind of bit of this sort of talisman that's hanging from his wrist. You want to just, when you're clipping this one off, whilst the connection points aren't actually on the brittle bit, which is really cool, just be careful with your clippers that you don't accidentally snag the actual cloth of it, the actual leather strap, because that can happen. So when you're coming in, just make absolutely certain that you kind of start here and go down like that, rather than trying to just come in like that, because you will catch it. I do it all the time by accident. Anyway, next up, so that's one thing to be very careful of. Next up, one thing I didn't mention on the Terminator Captain is you do want to just make sure that you're not clipping off any pegs, because then you will need glue. We didn't on him. We might need some later. The jury's still out on that one. But just make sure that when you're, for example, clipping here, sometimes the instinct is to clip right up against the model. That is part of the model just there. So do just be very mindful of that whenever you've got connection points on pegs. So there's one there, and there is one here as well. There's a peg there, not there. There's a peg there. So just bear that in mind when you're clipping these pieces out, because you don't want to make things harder for yourselves than they already are. Our head here, as you can see, is connected at the neck, and there is none connection point on the top. See, it is possible. It's lovely. We have a connection point here just under the knee, and that one's going to be very crucial to make sure you get that all off, that flash, because when you're pressing one of these in, I'm not sure which one yet, not that one, that's a shoulder, this one or this one, if that's not flush, then it won't go flush. So you want to make sure you get that nice and smooth down. And do just be careful when you're clipping around here, as well on the parchment of the kind of that purity seal coming down the front there. And when you're smoothing it down as well, just be careful, just brace it with your finger, because that is the type of thing that can easily bend off round about there. So do just watch out for that. Otherwise, this is really, really nice. We haven't got connection points on any kind of tubes, which sometimes you do get on Space Marine Librarian. So for example, here on the Storm Bolter, you could normally see a peg going in there, which is annoying to try and smooth down. And similarly, we don't have any separate tubes like this one, the ones that go down the front of the Primaris Librarians, at least, and indeed on this Terminator one. We've got these cables that come down like this. Sometimes the connection point, or indeed that is an entirely separate component which you would have to press in some way, shape or form, but it's actually one piece, which is really cool. But otherwise, this is really, again, just highly detailed, wonderful model. And we're just going to jump in and start building this one, and we're going to do this one on the time lapse, and we're going to do this one starting now. Alright, so 2 down, the Librarian is now built. And again, he was pretty easy. The only bit that was a little bit tricky was the leg assembly. So this is kind of part 1 here, just this bit here, B1 and B3. Just making sure that those were aligned was the only bit that was a little bit tricky, that required a bit of precision. And actually, I used the flat of a mold line remover just to make sure I pressed them into place. But otherwise, he's gone together very nicely. But as you can see, the captain still is the henchest model of all times. Not quite. But there you go. Putting them together side by side. There we are. So, our next sprue is sprue C, which is this one here. And this is, in fact, a big one. So because it's bigger than normal, what we've got is we've got 3 different units on one sprue. We have the Apothecary Biologist, we have the Lieutenant in Phobos armor, and we have the Stern Guard Veteran Squad. There, all of them on one sprue. Look at it. Isn't it fantastic? So, this is actually going to be quite tricky to kind of just do this kind of unit by unit, because the parts, whilst they are kind of clumped together, the occasional one is off in the wilderness somewhere else. So this is most of the Apothecary assembly. And if we look in the instructions, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 components. And there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. I'm not sure where the 12th one is. There's another one out there, but I'm not entirely certain. It might be right here. It might be just staring me in the face. But what we're going to do is we're going to do all of this at once. We're going to build them one by one, but we're going to do this entire sprue as a single kind of section, and then we will do 3 different time lapses for 3 different units. So starting with the Apothecary Biologist then. So we have components C1, C4, and C2 and C3. So if we look for those, there's 3, there's 2, there is, where's C1? Can you see it? Am I missing it? There's C1, there we go, there's our 12th component. So when we're looking at these components on the whole, we've got pretty good sprue here. We do have connection points for components here on flats of the armor panel. So here and here on 6 and 2. These are both of the Apothecary, I believe. Yes, they are. So we want to be very careful on these side bits because, you know, as per usual, we've got to make sure those are nice and smooth, because those are going to be very visible connection points on the sprue for us to look at when we've got the built model. But the areas of kind of interest for the Apothecary, we've got this cable here, so you want to make sure that you kind of clip that one first rather than doing these 2 bits, because you could bend and snap this and you don't want to do that. The other area to bear in mind is on this same component, C10 and C11, is that is going to be a kind of the single canister that he's holding, so it goes in half here and here. So you want to make sure that you get that nice flush fit if you've got any kind of bits that overlap. It doesn't look like there are from what I can see. This is the kind of wrist thing, and this will assemble with that. So the peg there isn't too long, so it gives me hope that that will go together nice and easy. But yeah, that's pretty cool. The next one we have is the Lieutenant in Phobos armor, but before we do that, we should just point out that we do have connection points on the domes of the backpacks, because it always happens. I've been told that it doesn't, but it does. There's your proof. The domes of the backpack here. We've got a really good one here on the what I'm assuming is in fact the Phobos Lieutenant. Yes, it is. It's on the very top, so that'll be nice and easy to smooth down. And the same thing for the Stern Guard Veterans backpack. I think that's the Veterans backpack here, and here, and here, and here, and here. So they're not on the domes, which is great. We're yet to get to the other squad yet, but this is a pretty cool sprue. That's something that we're just going to point out, that we do have it. It does exist here, always does, in one shape or form. The same as the connection points being on the side of the shin guards. That is another ever-present feature in Space Marine kits, so do just make sure you watch out for those and get them nice and smooth. The Lieutenant's pieces, so this is definitely his, this bit here, and we've got this kind of assembly for his entire body. He comes in an impressively small amount of components, given how wonderfully detailed he is. He comes in at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 components for this glorious miniature. And well, he comes in quite short on the amount, but he's no less detailed. His components, we do have connection point here on the what's it called, the leather pouch just there, which you want to be careful. You want to come in at this sort of angle when you're smoothing it, rather than just kind of going straight, because you will end up with some flash or some gouging, and you don't want that. The knives do have connection points, but they are on the flats of the blades rather than on the sharp sections, which is really, really good. So it means it's nice and easy to smooth down. The stern guard bodies, again, we do have the occasional connection point in places where we don't want it. So for example, just here on this magazine, that's going to be an outward facing detail, but generally on the stern guards bodies, they're connected at the feet, which is very, very cool. I'm very much into that. That's very nice. It makes our job a lot easier when it comes to smoothing down. However, we do occasionally have this on the opposite leg that will, not part of the main assembly. So for example, here's our kind of main body, but then on the opposite leg, this one, we have a connection point on the back of the hamstring. So you want to be nice and careful when you're smoothing that down, because again, you don't want any gouging. I know I'm repeating myself a lot, but this is all about kind of finding those pain points. The other bits to watch out for on any arms, like for example this one here, where you've got a connection point on the elbow guard, so do just be mindful of that, so that you don't kind of, again, gouge that one out. Make sure you take your time with those. Same on this one, this one, this one, this one's the same. This one doesn't have it, but we do have it on the hand, and that's always a little bit tricky. This one has it. The other thing to bear in mind is that all of the heads, as far as I can tell for the stern guard, their connection points are on the top, so on that kind of mohawk part of the helmet, and that will be very, very visible. So again, just be very gentle when you're smoothing that down, so as not to gouge it and take a big chunk out of the top of the head, because it becomes very, very obvious on that very kind of that top fin that all the Space Marines have on their helmets, excluding the beakies. But otherwise, I think this is a pretty cool sprue. It is very big. It's kind of like a double-sized sprue, but just that little bit wider. I've not seen this before, and we've actually got some empty space here. I've not seen that before, which is interesting. We've got it here as well, which is cool. I like it. It means it's nice and supported, and these components should be very durable and not flexible. You want them to be durable. But yeah, otherwise the same feedback remains. Just make sure you watch out for any pins, like this one just here. Don't clip the pin off, because that will make your life a little bit more difficult. And yeah, otherwise we're going to jump in and we're going to start building the Apothecary Biologis, then the Lieutenant in Phobos armor, and then we shall build the Stern Guard Veteran Squad. So our Stern Guard are all built. Here we are, looking awesome, looking fabulous, and looking fashionable as hell. They look incredible. Big fan of these. So we're now going to move on to the next ones, which are, of course, as the book dictates, the Terminators. Yes. And in this we get our 5 Terminators, and we also get our teleport homer as well. To do this, we will require 5 of these 40mm bases and 1 25mm base. Now it's important to check the 25mm base, because as you'll see again on this key here, what we do get is we also have some 28mm bases, and 28s and 25s can look eerily similar. So do just make sure you've definitely got a 25mm base here, because otherwise one of your gaunts is going to end up on a 25mm base if you get that one slightly wrong. So there we go, there's our 25mm base. And as mentioned, we get our 5 Terminators. One is a sergeant with a power sword and storm bolter. We have the other 3 with power fists and storm bolters, and then we have one with an assault cannon. There's no options as per usual with these push fits, but here we go. So what you get is you get this kind of full, it's kind of, well, it's a normal typical half sprue with a single sort of quarter sprue here on the end, which I've snapped in all my handling just there. So I'm just going to pop that off just for now. And as you can see, here's our first part of the sprue, and then we'll look at the other one in just a second. So looking at the sprue initially, it all seems pretty cool. The sword here doesn't have any connection points on it, which is very, very good. We do have some on the outward facing shoulder pad here and here, particularly on the back, and that's sometimes that you'll see with Terminators, that at the back there'll be quite a hefty connection point to the sprue. At least it's kind of always how it's been on the older Terminators, so you do just want to watch out for that kind of thing. I guess that's a reference, not a good one though. So we've got connection points on the shoulders that you want to be very careful when you're smoothing them down. The bodies themselves, again, we've got connection points on the flats of those hip plates here and here, and the same here and here, and same here and here. So you do just want to be very careful as you're putting that together. Make sure you don't gouge it too much when you're smoothing it down. The teleport homer comes in one single piece, which is really hot. I like it. It's good stuff. We have these are the kind of sheaths, or the kind of housings for the power fists. So these will go on top of our power fists here, for example. I believe 44 and 45. Yep, that's how they'll go together. So you will just want to be careful of those connection points, because those will be very obvious if you gouge them. So do just make sure you approach it very slowly and very carefully. Same for our leg guards, actually. We do have connection points on the outward facing details, which in this case is the kind of outside of the leg on the smooth armor panel surface. So do just be very careful. It's not always the case, because for example, we've got this leg here where there's a connection point just on the boot, which is very cool. But likewise, over here we have it on the boot peg, and we have it also on the armor panel itself. So do just watch out for that. We want to also make sure that you kind of hold on to the little kind of base fillers. So this component here, 49, because these guys all attach to these hexagonal points, but only one foot will go in one. You have a little bit of a kind of, well, scenic filler that goes in the other one. So do just watch out for those. They won't be immediately obvious to you every single time. So there's that one, for example, the little skull. Do just be careful that you don't throw this out and then have to cover up those hexes in a different way. Next sprue, here we have quite an amusing piece. It's like in cartoons when somebody gets blown up, all that's left is their legs. You can do quite a funny thing there, I suspect, for those of you who like to model things that look quite interesting, particularly for objective markers. That would be fun. Anyway, we have the same things here on this sprue. You've got connection points on the actual shoulders, because none of these shoulder pads, as far as I can tell, are actually loose. There's not going to be something that covers these over, so do just watch out for those. And as mentioned, it's pretty much the same feedback on here, but they're not in too many components, which is surprising for models that are this big. So for example, our sergeant here is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pieces. So it's really, really cool, because that means they go together very quickly, very easily, and they look beautiful. And I know that everybody's very, very excited for the Terminators. So that's what we're going to do now, is we're going to build up a Terminator on the time lapse, and then we're going to build the rest of them. Very nice, very cool. Terminators are all built, and we are truly rocking now with the Space Marines. Oh, teleport home is already trying to deploy itself. They are fantastic, they are massive, and they are cool. I'm a big fan. Just do a little size comparison for you. Here is a Stern Guard veteran, and here is a Terminator, which looks ace. That's exactly how they should always look. Amazing. Right, now it is time to move on, because of course we've got a lot more to build, and the next squad up on the docket is the Infernus squad. Now, to do this, we're going to need 10 of our 32mm bases. And again, I would just recommend checking the diagram in the front to make sure you're not pulling out the 28mm, because much like with 25 to 28, there's also very, very similar sizes between 28 and 32. And as you can see, for the 32s, this is where I'm going to embarrass myself. But for the 32s, the line isn't too far away, so it's easy to get the wrong ones out. But there we go, 32, perfect. Got one hex hole on it, but then the 25s and the 28s do as well. Anyway, we have our 10 and we have our Infernus squad. So we can build 2 5s or 1 10 out of these. I believe that is how it works. I'm going to build 1 10, so we're going to have 1 sergeant, because, well, there is kind of options to build 2 sergeants because we have 2 identical sprues, but it's going to be a monopost sergeant, so I don't want to have 2 sergeants that look exactly the same. So we're going to have 1 squad of 10 Infernus Marines, and, well, 10 flamers all bearing down on you in any game system is always horrid. So that's exactly what we're going to do. And that means that we only have to look at 1 of these sprues because they are identical, which is cool. Now, we don't get any options again here. What we do get is a bare head on our sergeant. That's what denotes him. He doesn't have a helmeted head, but I'm sure if you've got spare helmets, you absolutely could put one in. You just don't need to use the pins to do it. Now, looking at the sprue, these incinerators look awesome. I'm a big fan of them. Look how big and chunky they are. Yes, that's what they should look like. So, looking at the sprue then, these are pretty simple to put together by the looks of things. We have our kind of bodies, 1 2 3 4 5, or maybe that's a whole body there, and some things glued together. Haven't looked at the instructions too carefully, but as you can see within here, we've got our optional build for sergeant and, well, non-sergeant, although I guess you could say that he is a sergeant, but he would look also cool as a marine in the unit. Now you get ×2, ×2, ×2, ×2, and ×2. So there we go, 2 4 6 8 10. I believe that's how that works, or maybe I've miscounted. 2 4 6 8 10 11. There's going to be some overlap here somewhere. There must be, for kind of a normal basic marine. Anyway, we're looking too much at the paper, so we're going to look here instead at the sprue. Now, what we have is we have some connection points, as always in the Space Marine range, on the backpacks, on the domes. There they are. Here, here, you have them here. That's 3, 4, and 5. Yep, all of them have got their connection points on the domes. We don't have any that are sitting underneath here. This is slightly awkward to get to bit for clipping purposes, so that's nice, but we do still have those on the domes of the backpack, so do be careful and make sure you go with the grain of the model in order to smooth them down. They don't come in too many pieces, which is very nice. For example, here on this marine, 1 2 3 4 5 6, so these will be nice and quick to build, and they just look awesome. Now the helmets here, 1 2 3 4, and the head, and there's a 5th one there. The helmets all come with a connection point on the top on that mohawk once again, so again, just be very careful there. I wish it was on the neck, but it's not, so we just have to wear that one. And we have connection points on shoulder pads, which is a little bit annoying to see. These are always the areas that you're gonna just make mistakes if you're not careful, and it's absolutely the place to really focus on, because the shoulder is so prevalent on the miniature. Now, we do have a couple of hip plates, but we don't seem to have connection points on the hip plates in this kit, which is really cool. So that's a plus, but we do now also have to contend with them being on the shoulders. And I get it and can't avoid it all of the time, but that is just annoying. It's annoying. I can't spin that any other way. The weapons, we do have a connection point on the actual housing for the flamer as well. So again, another prevalent area where you want to be very careful in terms of the smoothing it down. And we do have connection points on elbow joints as well. So again, whilst that's usually facing downwards and you can't necessarily see that from far away, you will just want to be careful for those areas when you're building and painting these miniatures. Otherwise, this is a pretty cool sprue. I like it. There's a lot packed in here into this 1/2 sprue. And of course, we do have the other one, which, as already mentioned, is identical. There you go, as you can see. It's really cool. Really nice little squad. Interested to see what they do on the table. And can't wait to put them in some fast, zippy transports to unleash flamer death upon the Xenos and the Heretic alike. Lovely, lovely stuff. So we're going to jump in and start building them. These should be pretty quick. As mentioned, they're already about 6 to 7 components each, so that's really cool. And we will be back in just a second for a time lapse. So with all of those Infernus Marines now built, as you can see, we're in danger of having a really cool little force of Space Marines here. Look, they look fantastic. However, there is one last Space Marine model to build, and it is the centerpiece, some might argue, of the Leviathan Space Marine set. Obviously not the whole thing. We all know what the real centerpieces are. Damned Xenos. Yes, we have the Ballistus Dreadnought. This is the last stop for the Space Marines before we move on to Tyranid Central. So we're just going to move these all out of the way for the moment. Now, to do this, what you're going to require is a 90mm base. And you're going to require this single sprue of 21 components. Yes, 21 components to build what is an enormous walking machine of firepower and death, as you can see here. Now, it comes with that kind of traditional Hellfire Dreadnought type of loadout with the rocket launcher and the big old las cannon. And, well, it's nice to see this kind of model of Dreadnought make a return, which is fantastic. We don't have any alternate face plates, front plating or anything like that. We just have this version of the Dreadnought, as has been the theme for most of these kits. So here is the single sprue, and now I shall recover a 90mm base. There we have it, 90mm round base. It's got the 2 pegs in it. There it is. So let's look at the sprue, shall we? It is a vehicle sprue. So you would expect normally to see a vehicle sprue to be quite two-dimensional in its appearance. So you would expect sort of maybe this front plate like this to be one piece, but then you'd have 2 extra pieces for 3 extra pieces for this top section. However, because we were in a push fit kit, we do have some 3-dimensional areas on the sprue. So if we turn it sideways like that, you can see that the body of it does actually kind of cross the streams of the sprue quite a bit. So what that means is that we need to be on the lookout for mold lines in weird places, which you wouldn't normally expect. So, for example, whilst there isn't one, there is just a tiny little mold line along here. It's not very pronounced, but there is one there. So you will just want to very, very gently just go across it. Like that, just to really smooth that out. Otherwise, once you come to use contrast paints on it, you will absolutely see that come out. Should also expect to see some mold lines on areas such as the ports around here. So yeah, we've got very, very gentle, very small little mold line around there. But you generally won't see too many because these are brand new kits. But it is important to look out for when you have these large pieces that do kind of cross over the streams, or the sprues, as I should say. And on the big ones, of course, the mold lines are fairly easy to spot. So like on this las cannon, for example, there's a mold line that goes all the way around it because it sits right there in the middle. But because of the depth of the mold that this plastic was injected into, you might find that the mold lines do appear in some slightly weird places. Otherwise, this is a pretty cool sprue. Like I said, it's 21 components. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. And it's impressive. It's impressive and it's awesome. But there's not too much to say here. You do have some areas that you do have to watch out for. For example, on the legs, you've got these kind of joins areas, which is where these the sprue contact points are. So for example, when you're gluing this leg together, you will just want to be real careful that you don't gouge it too much, because you will want it to have a nice flush fit, like that sort of thing. There will be a gap in between it because that's what the kind of leg plates look like, so it's where the seam of the armor comes to play. But what you don't want to see is it kind of look like that sort of thing, which it can do if you gouge it too much, or if you kind of dig at it too much with a knife. Otherwise, it's a really, really simple sprue. There isn't very much to talk about here. So we're going to jump in and start building it. And, well, it's time for yet another time lapse. So with all of our Space Marines now fully built, we can move on to the Tyranids. And as again, what we're going to do is we're going to go through the instruction manual unit by unit in the order that it is in the box. So that means we're going to start with the Tyranid Prime. Now this is the one where I was missing that component. Here it is, the one that pinged off in the box, safe and sound as usual. So looking at the instructions, as you can see, just here, we don't have any options as per usual with this box. But what we do have is we have our sprue here. Now this is where our captain was. This is our only joint sprue in the box. So looking here then, we've got a pretty cool looking layout for the model. The wings, for example, here and here are both in a single piece, which is really nice. And the body all appears to be one single piece as well, pretty much. We do, of course, have some large missing areas here on our sides of the body, but that's to be expected, so that this can pretty much stay in a kind of two-dimensional plane. However, the wings do cross over, as you can see, so you're going to want to watch out for any slightly peculiar placed mold lines. For example, you might see some on the actual membrane of the wing, perhaps. I can't see any, so that's very good. Very nicely done. Well done, Games Workshop. Good stuff. But otherwise, it's always kind of a little bit tricky to look at these things because they're not as straightforward as Space Marines, because they are in fact xenomorphs, and you always have to kind of have a slightly different outlook when you're building such things, because you don't have a lot of, or at least a ton of straight edges. What you do in fact have is a lot of kind of bio areas. So for example, this area on the tail, you want to be very careful when you're smoothing that down. So again, so that you don't gouge it out So clip it nice and close and then smooth it very gently with a knife or a mold line remover. Same for these blades. We do actually have connection points on the kind of very obvious parts of the kind of the scything talons. These go just down here, here and here. So the literally front facing details. So if you forget to flash them, you'll have a very obvious bit of extra plastic which you don't want. And if you gouge them too much, again, you'll have a very obvious kind of nick in it, especially if you're going to use contrast paints like we are going to. So do just be very careful on things like that as well. The carapace connections here as well are something just to watch out for. So just there, that's going to be kind of the crest of a point like that. So you just want to be very careful. You want to come in at the angle at which the carapace is connected, because the central part of it is just there. So you want to come in at this angle rather than going in. Where's the bit? You want to kind of come in at this angle here. That way you're not kind of taking off the top of the arch, because you don't want it to be smooth and then the rest of the detail has got this point. That'd be slightly annoying and you'll miss the edge when you come to paint it. Otherwise, this is very simple for the winged Tyranid Prime. Very simple piece of kit. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 and 11 pieces. This of course being the missing leg. Now in order to build this, we will require a 50mm base, which is what we have just here. So we're going to jump in and start doing that on our time lapse starting now. Our winged Tyranid Prime is now built, so we can pop it to one side and we can move on to another exciting new miniature. They're all exciting new miniatures, but we have the Neurotyrant, never seen before, and its 2 Neuraloids, which are here on the other page. Single build option, I believe. Yeah, no, 1 and 2. So you've got 2 different shaped Neuraloids, which is cool, rather than just being a ×2 type deal. Awesome. For them, we're going to require some 25mm bases. I haven't got those out yet. For the Neurotyrant, we will require a 50mm base, which is surprising. I thought it would be on a bigger one, but there we go. Continue to surprise me every time, Games Workshop. Now, what we have is we have a single sprue here for our Neuraloid. Neurotyrant. Now, this one shares a sprue with the Screamer Killer, as you can see, because not all of this belongs to both. So what we're going to do is we're going to build the Neurotyrant, the Neuraloids, and the Screamer Killer all at once, just kind of like we did with the Space Marines, just because it's all on the one sprue. So we can look at all of it at once, and then we can move on to the next bit. For the Screamer Killer, we will require a 90mm base, of which there are 2 in the box. It's the round ones. Here we go. So it will go that one there, and 120mm is the one that is being saved for the Psychophage, which is awesome. So let's start by looking at the sprues. Now, not the sprues, the instructions. We don't have, again, there's no options. It's not an optional build here, but what we do have is we have lots and lots of cool, awesome detail. And we're going to get 4 brand new miniatures out of these section. So looking at the sprue then, here it is in all of its glory. It's absolutely fantastic. Loads of massive components, which I'm always a big fan of. So we have the body of our Neurotyrant here, the body of our Screamer Killer just there. You can see how big he is in comparison to everything else that's in the box. It's absolutely enormous chungus. Neurotyrant body here, as mentioned, we've got its brain, loads and loads and loads of lovely sculpted detail there for the brain part, which is absolutely fantastic. The thick legs for the Screamer Killer. Oh my goodness me, what an absolutely fantastic sprue. I love it, absolutely love it. We have another part of the Neurotyrant just here. So this sprue, first and foremost, as you look down here, it's mostly two-dimensional on that single plane, but we do have a couple of large pieces that cross the plane, so they're a bit 3D in nature. So there's mostly looking at these two large sections here. So what you want to be careful for and on the lookout for is any slightly peculiar mold lines. So for example, you can see one just here. There's this ridge which will need to be smoothed out just a bit, not too much, but that's because, you know, we've got that kind of slightly peculiar placing on the sprue. We might also have some that will kind of be along the kind of the ports of these kind of, well, I always think they're exhaust ports, but they're not, because these are giant monsters. So, you know, whatever they are, gills, blowholes, whatever they are. So on these two large pieces, you would just want to be on the lookout for any slightly peculiarly placed mold lines. Similarly on this piece here, it's kind of sunken in a little bit and it goes to either side of the sprue. But the rest of it all seems to at least sit very much on that two-dimensional plane. So the mold lines should be in places that are fairly easy to find. So for example, around here on the tentacle, that's pretty standard for where that's going to be, just because of where it's placed on the sprue and the way it's placed on the sprue. When it comes to things like the Screamer Killer's legs, we want to be on the lookout for any connection points that are again at the apex of the carapace armor, so like that. So when you've got a connection point, as we do right here, whilst this leg does glue into two places, you will just want to kind of dry fit these together, presuming that they go together, 24 and 25, and then just very carefully smooth them down so that you still retain that point, rather than on one of the kind of panels it might look a little bit like that if you gouge it too much on one side versus on the other. So you just want to make sure you dry fit them together if you can, and then do the mold line removal on those parts for those carapace bits. Similarly, be on the watch out for slightly peculiarly placed plugs. So for example, here on this bit, we've got little tiny plugs for our push fit areas. Just be on the watch in case you accidentally clip those off. Same here, because it's not, again, like I said earlier, it's not as obvious on these kind of sprues which ones are supposed to be which, because you're looking at irregular shapes, whereas on the Space Marines, it's fairly easy to understand which ones are meant to be there and which ones are not. One thing to watch out for though is we do have some spindly little details. So we've got this kind of, these tentacles here and here. We've got the fingers on the hands, arms, things here and here. So when you're clipping those out, just look for any kind of potential stress points. So for example, on this one here, you'll want to clip it on that finger first before clipping it on here and on here. Because if you don't do that one first, you can potentially push from here into that and get a bit of snappage. Over here, this isn't so much of a problem because you've only got the 2 connection points on that arm, whereas this one we do have the 3. And whenever you've got a 3er, you always want to be a little bit careful. Same here on this tentacle and on this one, to be fair. You want to clip the tentacle first before getting the body, because again, you don't want to kind of cause any stress in these little joints from where these pieces are put together on the sprue. We do have other little areas just to be watch out for. Component 29 and component 30 are ones that are very easy to miss, so do just bear those in mind. Take a snapshot now. There they are. They've got their own little kind of sprue within which they sit. It's very easy to miss. Same for component 27, just there, whose actual detail faces the other way. So instead you get that what just looks like individual bits of the kind of the structure of the sprue. So again, just watch out 1, 2, and 3 pieces. They're very tiny and very, very difficult to spot. But otherwise, this is a very, very cool sprue. We've got 2 or 4, I should say, massive brand new models. 2 massive ones, 2 little tiny gribblies, and I'm excited to build these. So we'll do these in a series of time lapse. We'll do the Neuro Tyrant and the Neuroloids at once, and then we will move on to the Screamer Killer. But we will
We'll do it all in one, because we looked at that single sprue. And there we go. I'm excited. Are you? This dude is enormous. Let's compare him to our size comparison Primaris Lieutenant. Look at him. He's huge. Screamer Killer indeed. We have built the Screamer Killer. He's all done. And we have our Neuro Tyrant as well, who's got the height, not necessarily the bulk, but he's got the height. It's a very cool model. Anyway, these two are now done. So, we've also done the Neuroloids as well. There they are. But it is now time to move on, as we've got lots more Tyranids to build. So the next kit, or the next set of models involved, is the Von Ryan's Leapers. What we're going to need for this are 3 of your finest 40mm bases. There they are. And we're going to require this one single sprue, and this is where things get really cool, right? So all of this is contained in the one single sprue, and it is a very, very flat sprue, as you can see. We don't have things crossing the plane too much, so that means we're going to get lots of really nice smooth details, none of the kind of weird kind of like hard lines that you get when you have kind of components that across the field of the sprue, as you can see. Now we've got a bunch of components on here, and this is obviously where we've got all 3 of our models. And well, again, it's a little bit difficult to critique, but we do have some feedback here. So we've got some connection points on the soft skin of the Von Ryan's Leapers. So we've got here, here, and here, and here, and here, and we've got some here on the tip of that bit of carapace. Same here, we've got another connection point just there on that little section of skin, so you will just want to watch out for those. Make sure you get them nice and smooth. We do have connection points on the actual blades as well, so this is the, if the claw is like this is all the really visual stuff, right? So this stuff will be kind of, if it's like this stuff will be facing the back of the model. So if you don't do a perfect job on here, that's okay. So when you're looking at it front on, like say for example this, you won't see it. So this is a better example. When anything where you've got a connection point on that part of the claw, you really want to be careful that you don't gouge it. You want to make sure that you follow the curve of the claw. Whereas if it's like, for example, in there or around here, again, you're not going to really see it from this perspective or around here. So you can afford to be a little bit sloppy, but obviously you don't want to be. So all of these claws, rending claws and scything talons, they have that going on. So for example, just here you've got that one, which will be a really front facing detail. This one will still be a front facing detail, but that one not so much because of the way it's built on the sprue. Now we do have some slightly fiddly places to watch out for. For example, just here on the top of this leg, and we've got connection points consistently on the top bits of the carapace or the armor on each of the legs. So again, just want to be careful when you've got that kind of that going on with the armor pad.
or section of armor on the arms and legs and backs. You want to be careful when it's like this, when you've got the connection points or just here, or even crossing over both of the parts of the triangle. Just make sure you're smoothing those mold lines based on the angles that you are at or that you want to preserve, because again, you don't want it to be segmented plate that's like sort of got this weird flat one and then got the nice angle over the rest of it. So you will just want to be careful. So there, here, here. I'm sure there's more. Yep, here, here. Yeah, it's all over the place. But that's a consistent thing with these Tyranid kits. Otherwise, it's a pretty cool sprue. We do have some individual kind of plugs, so that means there is going to be one guy at least that just, yep, there he is, that just goes in by 1 foot, which is really awesome. Nice dynamic models. And well, I think it's probably time to build ourselves some Von Ryan's Leapers. Nice and quick. The last 5 models in fact, have been pretty quick. Tyranids not proving too complex in their build, despite looking very complex on the sprue, which is really awesome. So, let's crack on, shall we? So with Von Ryan's Leapers all built, we can now move on to the swarm itself, or at least the beginnings of the swarm. So we have our Termagants coming up next. Now you get 20 of these in the box, and you get 2 identical sprues with which to build them. In order to build them, you're going to require these 2 sprues, but you will also require 20 of these 28mm bases and 2 of these 40mm bases, because as part of the Termagants, you also have the Ripper Swarms, which is fun. Love Ripper Swarms. They look awesome. They look like the Forge World ones, which is excellent. Anyway, so we're looking at the Termagants next, and they seem relatively simple to build. They each come as 4 components. 1, 2, 3, 4, which is fantastic. And that's consistent across all, well, 20 of them. Because sometimes, you know, you'll get a kit where it's like, they're all 4 components, apart from this one where it's missing a toe. So that one comes in 5 or 6 components, but at least you know where you're at with these. So 4 components each, which is very, very cool. And the Ripper Swarms, you get some loose ones here, and then you got a couple that stick together and they go in the peg, which is really nice. So you could just build these as separate guys on separate bases, but why would you? You want a little swarm of 4 men, innocent men. So that's the instructions. It's fairly simple here, of course. It's been fairly simple throughout this video, but we're now going to look at the sprues. Now they are identical sprues as previously mentioned. There they are. And if I overlap them like so, you shouldn't see any variation in the sprues whatsoever. However, we do have one thing to point out on this one, and at some point during its packing and unpacking, this little guy has had his tail stressed a little bit. So it's been kind of had some pressure put on it from a certain direction. I can't tell which one, but it's just one thing to watch out for, because as we've already mentioned, 2 of my components were already loose, so there might be some others that get pressed out by accident. As it can tell though from here, we're intact, which is really cool. So looking at this sprue then, we don't need to look at both of them because as I mentioned, they are identical. When we flip it like that and we see it flat, it is nice and 2-dimensional. So you're going to see all of the mold lines, if there are any, in the places that you would expect to see them, which is always good. Really like that. There shouldn't be anything too peculiar here, and these are very, very simple. It's amazing that you can get 10 Termagants on such a small sprue, really, honestly. There must be, what, 40 components there if each one comes in 4s? And then the Ripper Swarm as well is another 4. So there's 44 components on that one set of sprue, which is actually fantastic. Now, we do have the same feedback on this one as we have had on all of the Tyranid kits. So again, things just to watch out for. We do have connection points on tails, on the soft parts here, for example, and on here, and on here, so you will want to be very careful with that. And we have connection points on top of the kind of exhaust chimney spouts of our Termagants, so do just watch out for those. But we don't seem to have too many that are actually on the kind of segmented plate, which is really, really cool. Got it a little bit here and a little bit here on this kind of snout, which is right at the front of the model, so you do have to watch out for it. But it's not like, as far as I can tell, at the top, right in the middle, across the apex of the armor, which is pretty cool. I really like that. We've got some connection points on the guns on the actual barrels as well. So these are kind of, like I said, the most obvious connection points. So when you're obvious outward facing details, I should say. So when you glue them and you look at them face on, you need to watch out for those kinds of areas, just in case you gouge them too much. Do just be very careful when you're smoothing things out, because you don't want to ruin it. Well, you won't ruin it, but you don't want to have those little cuts and gouges in it. So do make sure you have a knife and a mold line remover on standby with which to do this. We do have the occasional clawed limb as well, where we've got some connection points on the actual kind of wrist or knuckle of the claw, which is better than it actually being on the claw itself. It makes for a much kind of nicer thing when it's frontward facing detail, especially on the smooth claw, which you want to be nice and smooth and sharp and lethal. But otherwise, this is a really cool sprue. Both sprues, of course, because it's exactly the same. So we're going to jump in and start building. Not painting, we're not there yet. Good lord, I'm tired. I've built a lot of models very, very recently. So let's jump in and start doing it. We're going to build all 20, but we are going to just film the one, and I think it shouldn't take much longer than 5, maybe 7 minutes. We shall see. I'll be right back in just a moment. Termagants are all built. However, my hands are not big enough to hold 20 plus 2 Ripper Swarms. But here they are. Here's one. Really awesome. Very, very quick to build, as I guessed. My window has now closed. It's going to get hot in here. That's what the bang was. Right. It's time to move on because we don't have time to open windows. We have time to build more miniatures. Now, the next set of miniatures is the Neurogaunts, including the Node Beast, which is a slightly bigger Neurogaunt, and the Barbgaunts, because they once again come on one single sprue. The components all scattered together. Well, there's all of our Barbgaunts, and I'm assuming that's all of our Neurogaunts. There's probably a leg or two that cross over. Anyway, we have our one sprue, and in order to build all of these, what we are going to require is 5 40mm bases, 10 25mm bases, and 1 28mm bases, because the Neurogaunts is actually a unit of 11, because you've got 10 Neurogaunts and a Neurogaunt Node Beast, and then you have your 5 Barbgaunts as well. So, looking at the instructions, as you can see, the Neurogaunt Node Beast comes in 4 components. However, all of the rest of our individuals all come in 2, which is very, very, very cool. The Barbgaunts all come in about 4 components by the looks of things. We've got no surprises there. No, 1, 2, 3, 4. Yep, 4 components. So you have 4, 8, 12, 16, 20 components here. And we have a further 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 24. So 44 components again. There we go. Isn't that fantastic? Yes, let's look at the sprues, shall we? We've only got one more unit left after this. We've built a lot of miniatures so far. So we'll just start by looking at the Neurogaunts just here on the right-hand side, this sprue here. First things first, the same feedback here and the same points to bring up. as has been consistent across all of these, which is a criticism, but it's also very good because it means you get very practiced by the end of this, having built 21, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 29 miniatures so far. So looking at the sprues, as mentioned, we do have the same feedback here. So we've got our connection points on the smooth parts of the tail, so you want to be careful there, and we have some connection points on the tops of the kind of angled carapace. But otherwise, as mentioned, we've only got two components per model here, so these will go together really quickly. There's lots and lots of lovely detailed components here. We've got all these brains and things in and around the models, which is awesome. They look absolutely fantastic. And we've got connection points on some of the front-facing scything talons. Not that these will be scything talons. They are talons that scythe. So you do want to be careful for them because you want to make sure you get a nice smooth cut on them when you're smoothing them down. You don't want to gouge them too much because those will be front-facing talons. So there's just one thing to bear in mind. We have the occasional thing happening on the chin as well. That'll be quite fiddly because these are very diddy little guys. So for example, that connection point there, which we've been fussing over, we've got one here as well, and we have another one. I did spot it, can't see it for the moment. So those are all just those kind of little areas to watch out for. However, what we do have is we have connection points quite nicely on the bottom of the pegs and on the bottom of the hooves, which is really cool. But you will want to make sure that you do smooth those down because these are push fit and they go into the bases via pegs. If you don't smooth the one down on the foot that doesn't have the peg, you might have something that kind of sits a little bit awkwardly, just like ever so slightly off the top of the base. So do watch out for that. You want to make sure you get that flush as well. Looking at the Barbgaunts then, these guys are a lot bigger than the Neurogaunts, almost twice the size by the look of things, and they are wicked. Again, super fine details, symbiotic Tyranids. We have our sort of weapon beast that carries it, and then an additional bug that is actually the gun, which is absolutely awesome. I love it. It's really cool. And these are connected in pretty much exactly the same way as we've talked about all along, in that we've got connection points on our exhaust ports. We've got a little one here on the front, and then occasionally we have them, they always have them on that smooth part of the tail. So that is one thing to bear in mind. We do have connection points here on the top of the carapace, so again, be careful there because you don't want to gouge that out so you don't get that nice fine triangular point on the carapace. But otherwise, we're looking at a pretty fantastic sprue, packed with components and packed with detail, and I can't wait to build them. Now, we are going to be building them both. I'm going to film, or time-lapse I should say, a Neurogaunt Node Beast and a Neurogaunt, because, you know, they're two individual things. And I will also time-lapse a Barbgaunt so you know just how much it's going to take to build this entire sprue. And we're going to do that starting now. So with our Barbgaunts all built, and our Neurogaunts as well, and the Node Beast, we are now going to make our way to the final miniature of Leviathan. And it is a Leviathan. It's a Psychophage. It's enormous. It's really big. But in classic Amazing Games Workshop fashion, this is a push-fit kit consisting of 9 components, of which you get these massive bits. of highly detailed plastic. This is absolutely fantastic. I just behold it in awe for a moment. Yes, it's only 9 components. And here we have the instructions over a 2-page spread, because it deserves it, because it's that big. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 base. And in order to build it, you will require the last base in the box, which is this 120mm base. Pretty difficult to miss this one, but there it is. It's the biggest one in the box. Now, as mentioned, it is only 9 components. I think I've said that 3 or 4 times now. You get this one single sprue, so there aren't too many components to look at, which means there isn't a ton of thinning and scraping that you're going to have to do with your mold line remover and your knife. What you do have, though, is you have these 2 enormous components, and this might be one of those very rare moments in this box where you will actually have to use a little bit of glue just to really press it together, because this is just 2 large components that stick together with a tongue in the middle. And you might get, for example, just along here, you might get a gap. So you might want to use a little bit of glue just to make sure that definitely goes together. But what you do have on the back here is you've got these overlapping chimneys and exhaust ports, which will cover any of those types of sins up there. It's just around here on the back and across the top here on the head where you might have to use it. I don't know yet because I haven't built it, but you may have to use glue for like the 2nd time in the entire box. But as mentioned, there's only 9 components, so we've got the 2 big massive ones, and the connection points are placed pretty nicely, if I'm being honest. We've got them at the peaks of the carapace on this side, but as mentioned, these kind of chimneys will cover over the top of those, so that's okay. You just have to make sure you get the flash off, because if you don't, they won't go flush together. Same here on the soft belly on the underside, although that will be the underside of the model. It is going to be facing up in the air from the back, as you can see just here, based on the way the Psychophage is in fact posed on the base. So do make sure that, again, you're just very careful when you're smoothing these down so you don't get those gouges when you're gluing the 2 halves together. You've only got 1 on the underside on this side, so it's this side that you really have to focus on. But otherwise, these ones are on the underside of the model, as you can see right under here. So it doesn't have to be perfect under there. Now, when it comes to the large legs, this one does not have a connection point on the smooth blade of the limb, but this one does, so do make sure you watch out for that. And we have the same deal going on with the next size up of leg, or size down of leg, I should say. So again, do just watch out for those. And then on the tiny little legs that we're going to have be basically our anchor points for the whole model, aside from this one here, you just want to be careful on the top of that leg, because again, that's be a very visible area that if you don't smooth it down, it will be a bit of a problem, or at least you'll be very noticeable with your gouging on your model. But otherwise, there's not a lot to say about this sprue, given it is only, and I'm hammering the point home, 9 components for something of this size. For something on a 120mm oval base, 9 push fit components. What a world we live in, eh? Absolutely outstanding. So, I guess it's time for our final time lapse on our last model. So here we go. As you can see, we've vacated downstairs because my desk is simply not big enough or man enough for the job of containing the entirety of the Leviathan set in one place. Here are all of the Space Marines. Here are all of the Tyranids. Here is everything. It's an absolutely flabbergasting amount of plastic here. And, well, conveniently, I've laid out 2 spray cans because we're going to be now priming them. We've got Wraithbone for all of the Tyranids
and Grey Seer for all of the Space Marines. That's right. It's going to be fun. Is it? I don't know. It's priming season. We'll be back very, very soon with a primed set of Leviathan. And lo and behold, there we have it. Space Marines in Grey Seer, Tyranids in Wraithbone. And we still have half a tin of Grey Seer and about a quarter of Wraithbone left over for more stuff when it finally makes its way out, or to me, or when I buy more toys, because that is inevitably something that's going to happen, because, well, we have a fantastic looking set on both sides, and they both deserve more friends for these armies. So there we have it. The entire set built and primed. So I guess future Josh will now wrap things up. Thanks, past Josh. Yes, I'm future Josh. The Josh that introduced the whole thing. It's very confusing when there's multiple versions of us all knocking around, but then that's what the multiverse is for. Yes, the entirety of Leviathan is now built and primed, and some of it has been painted, but for now, I'm not going to show you what that is. Suffice to say, Blood Angels and High Fleet Leviathan. Because of course! What do you take me for? Yes, all built and primed. Now I bet you're wondering, how long did it take to build the entire set all together? Well, I have it here in my note of power. 330 minutes for all the Space Marines and 298 minutes for all of the Tyranids, giving us a lot of time. Yes, you could probably get this done in a day, but it would be a long, long day. Now, it took me a couple of days because I was not very well whilst I was building it. So, you know, take things slow and steady. But it was mostly a very, very, very enjoyable experience. My thumbs were not as ruined as they normally are when doing that much building, especially with the push fit stuff of pushing everything together. Now, the Tyranids went surprisingly quickly and are in really good shape on the sprues. The mold lines are almost non-existent on there, which is something I would come to expect from such a new box, but it's still a really nice surprise. And the same thing goes for the Space Marines. Now, there are a couple more mold lines on the Space Marines, but that's because they've got a lot of those very smooth armor plates and stuff like that. So you're bound to kind of cross into them a little bit. You're obviously going to see more of them when you're building your models. But they were also a lot of fun. Now, I think there was only 2 or 3 instances where I had to use glue, which is really, really surprising. I'm absolutely flabbergasted by this, because that was not the case with Indomitus. I had to use a lot of glue on Indomitus. I had to cut off a lot of pegs on Indomitus just to get things to go together. Whereas with this lot, all just goes together really nicely. Clips right in, pushes nice and smooth, and doesn't require too much pressure in order to get it done, which is very, very, very nice for somebody like me who despises building. So I would even go as far as to say you probably don't need glue for this, but I know a bunch of you will use it, so knock yourself out. Now, it seems absolutely fitting that this one gets a rating on the Land Raider scale. The box and the build experience, I can't really fault them. Really, really, really top quality. Missing those 2 components, I mean, they weren't missing, but they'd been pinged out of the sprues. That was a bit of a knockoff, bit of a markdown, as it were. But really, I'm just so excited by this box, and the building was such a pleasurable experience that I'm just going to come right out and say it. The box, as a miniaturist, as a builder, as a painter, well, not as a painter yet. You don't know what the painting's like. Trust me, it's cool. But the box as a miniature building experience, I'm going to give it a 9.5 out of 10. Yes, that might be the highest score that anything has ever got. 9.5 out of 10 on the Land Raider scale. I mean, finally I got to use it for some Space Marines, right? So yes, I'm very, very, very happy with this box. I'm absolutely just champing at the bit to get some games of 10th edition done, and we will have some videos on how to play and kind of the top 10 things that we've picked out for 10th edition because, well, the core rules are available as of right now. You can get them online from warhammercommunity.com, and you should absolutely go and do that. But there's a couple of things that I'm like to pick out and just share with you. But we're not going to do that in this video, as we've already mentioned, because this one is already very, very long, and I'm conscious of keeping you too much longer. I don't want to do that. Except I do, because my watch time would be great. So the only thing left for me to say is thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this extended look at the building of Leviathan, and I hope that you also can't wait to get your hands on a copy of this. Massive, massive thank you to Games Workshop for sending me this early, because it's 10th edition, baby. It doesn't get better than this. If you enjoyed this video, you love the channel, and you'd like to support me further, you absolutely can do so. Head to patreon.com/Warhipster, just like these bosses have done, scrolling up on the screen before you, whose continued support helps me continue to make all the wonderful content that you enjoy. Alternatively, you could become a YouTube channel member by clicking on the join button on the channel page or just below this video, like these wonderful, amazing people have done. And if you really like this video and you just want to shoot me a little thanks, you can click on the thanks button just below this video. Don't forget to share it, like it, comment on it, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. And to make sure you stay up to date, don't forget to click the bell icon. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all very soon in the next one. Happy wargaming.